It is now clear that we've achieved the most incredible political thing. Look what happened. Is this crazy?
Donald Trump has won the elections. So does this mean that BRICS now is in trouble? Let's find out. Why should this even be a question? There are several reasons for it. First of all, BRICS has been positioning itself as an alternative political and economic order, challenging the US-dominated global order, which has been in place since pretty much after the Second World War. President Trump has made it clear that his policy is about America first. President Trump is also concerned about the pace of de-dollarization.
If we lost the dollar as the world currency, I think that would be the equivalent of losing a war.
So, for President Trump, addressing this new alternative order that is being pursued by BRICS and this process of de-dollarization are two important challenges that must be addressed if he is to make his America first or make America great again policy to become a reality. So, President Trump has warned that any country that pursues de-dollarization will be subject to a 100% tariff on goods that enters the US territory. The second fact that we have to bear in mind is the status of de-dollarization.
The US dollar has dominated global trade and capital flows for decades. However, many nations are now looking for alternatives. Let's take a look at the history of dollar dominance to better understand de-dollarization. The 1920s saw the displacement of pound sterling as an international reserve currency following the First World War, while 1944 saw international trade begin to be conducted in USD. From 1960 to 1971, the backing of dollars with gold became increasingly difficult, with President Nixon ceasing the direct convertibility entirely. Jumping ahead to 2014, Russia prioritizes de-dollarization in response to Western sanctions, while the past 2 years have seen central banks buy gold at the fastest pace since 1967. Many countries have begun to consider alternatives, however 60% of the world's reserves are still in USD.
What has happened within BRICS is there has been an attempt to further reduce the reliance on the dollars, especially in terms of settlements of trade. So the BRICS countries have been experimenting with various forms of bilateral payment arrangements. There's been talk about creating a new currency perhaps for BRICS or some sort of platform where they can actually use their own national currencies for settlement. Some of them have taken place, they have been progressing to a certain degree, but this single currency has not become a reality. Let us recall what BRICS actually is.
They are richer than the G7 club with 1/3 of the world's GDP. They want to create an alternative to the global order unfairly dominated by the West since World War II. They are currently meeting in Russia for the first time with 10 members. So, what is BRICS? The BRIC acronym was coined by a Goldman Sachs economist in 2001 to describe Brazil, Russia, India, and China as the economies predicted to dominate the world by 2050. The bloc's first summit was held in 2009 to provide greater representation of non-Western countries in international financial institutions and support India and Brazil in their call for a greater role at the UN. 2 years later, South Africa joined the club and it became BRICS. In 2023, for the first time in more than 10 years, BRICS admitted new members: Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. Argentina was also accepted, but the country's far-right leader Javier Milei refused to join.
During the summit of 2024 in Kazan, which took place in October, there was a long list of countries, but BRICS decided not to admit them as new members, but 13 countries were accepted as partner countries. So the point I want to make here is that BRICS has become a very popular alliance. There is also a third development. It's known as mBridge. mBridge is a payment settlement platform that was set up in 2021 by the central banks of Thailand, Hong Kong, China, and the UAE. Now, as you all know, international settlements are conducted by using US dollars and through the system known as the SWIFT system. Now, these four countries set up mBridge as an experimental platform by which they can settle payments among themselves without using dollars and without using the SWIFT system. And since 2021, they have been testing the system with the help of the Bank of International Settlement. In June, a few months ago, June 2024, the Bank of International Settlement finally announced that this mBridge project has been proven to be viable.
Big news today. The BIS, the Bank for International Settlements, commonly known as the Central Bank for Central Banks, has been working closely with the BRICS bloc coalition, specifically China, to launch a new central bank digital currency CBDC platform. This platform is dubbed Project mBridge. And while it's been in the works for a while, this week there was a new release that caught my attention. Not only because the platform's viable, but because they accepted a fifth full-time member. That member is no one other than Saudi Arabia. Now, the reason why this is so important and so concerning to the US dollar is because Saudi Arabia is, of course, part of OPEC, the oil-producing countries. And Saudi Arabia, in particular, is key to the United States' dominance as having the global reserve currency. What I mean by that is, in 1972, when the United States dollar was delinked from gold, there was an agreement made in the following years that all oil would be priced in USD. Because of this agreement, there is always demand for US dollars because all oil is priced in US dollars. Now, some countries have moved away from this, such as Russia or Iran pricing in different currencies, but ultimately the effect of that has still been minimal. But should a country like Saudi Arabia start pricing their oil in a different currency, say the Chinese yuan, well, now we have a huge problem on our hands, because the United States dollar will not be in as high of demand. Now, we don't know for sure if that's going to happen. There's been a lot of speculation for a while, though, because Saudi Arabia has not been quiet on this topic. They have been saying now for months that they are open to and considering other currencies. In the past, this wasn't even a possibility because there really weren't any other currencies that they could have considered. But now, with the BRICS bloc growing stronger, there are other options and their strength in numbers. So specifically with this Project mBridge, one of the reasons why this feels like they're laying the groundwork here is that mBridge does not support US dollars. So now we're going to have Saudi Arabia be part of this project that specifically is intended to facilitate cross-border payments, but it won't be in US dollars.
Now, because the entire project was still overseen by the Bank of International Settlements, what it meant was SWIFT-based system also has a certain way of keeping an eye on how the mBridge project is proceeding. During the BRICS summit in 2024 that took place in Kazan recently, there was some discussion perhaps of making this mBridge project as the BRICS payment system. That discussion began to take shape, as I understand it, because this idea of creating a new currency for BRICS appeared to be almost an impossible task. So there was this idea that perhaps mBridge could be that thing that BRICS could now take over. Whatever it is, hardly a week after the summit in Kazan ended, the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland suddenly announced that it was pulling out, it was no longer going to host the mBridge project. I don't know what was the intention of doing so, but when it pulled out, China immediately took up the challenge and announced that it would take over the administration of the mBridge project. What has happened now is that the global payment system has been split into two. One is the still very dominant US SWIFT-based system, And now you have a smaller system, fledgling, still growing, the mBridge system, which is Chinese administered. So from the strategic perspective, it just appears to be a colossal mistake. From a situation where the US was entirely in control of the global payment system through its SWIFT, perhaps through its own actions, has now created or facilitated the emergence of a dual system, and one which is going to be run by its adversary, which is China. This reminds me of a game of tennis. You can actually lose a game of tennis not because your adversary or your opponent is strong. You can lose a game of tennis because you play the game poorly. Every serve that your opponent passes to you, you hit it into the net or hit it out of the court. And I'm reminded of that when I look at this current situation. As I look at it, now you have, on the one hand, the United States, which has already warned all the countries not to pursue de-dollarization and also not to pursue this new order that they are thinking about. Whereas on the other hand, there's a very strong push from so many countries to become a member of BRICS, ostensibly because they are all interested in pursuing this new global economic and political order. And you have a fledgling payment system that could potentially be taken up by BRICS. Let us look and see what are the interests and positions that could be taken up by the member countries. Let us start with Russia. President Putin is clearly happy that Trump has won the elections. Even during the campaign, when Trump said that he would end this war in Ukraine if he were to be elected president, was warmly welcomed by President Putin. And true enough, when Trump won the elections, President Putin immediately congratulated Trump on his victory, and he has basically said that he's ready to start the talks on how to end the war in Ukraine. It's not easy, but at least the path appears to be clear, and that is now welcomed by Russia. So what it means is that Russia has a strong incentive to try and work with President Trump and the United States. The second major player is China. Now, China understood it very clearly that it is going to be the object of Trump's tariffs if he were to become president. But President Xi Jinping has also announced Trump that China is prepared to sit and talk with Trump. The third big player is India. Now, India, right from the beginning, has not been terribly warm about the de-dollarization project. India's interest was make its rupee be one of those currencies that would be used in this international settlement. India has problems with China, and it needs the support of the Americans. So, from the way I see it, I think India too would have greater incentive to try and work together with the United States. And then you have the other members and the partner countries that were admitted recently. If all these three major powers in BRICS are more or less inclined to try and work together with the US, it's more likely that all of them would also fall in line. I started by asking whether BRICS is going to be in trouble now that Trump had won the elections. From what I can see, at this point at least, I think BRICS is not going to be in trouble. In fact, BRICS seems to be incentivized to try and work together with the Trump administration. But of course, it depends on how the Trump administration would react and behave. But we have no way of knowing this now. I guess we'll have to wait until President Trump is sworn in January next year. Oh, by the way, if you liked this video, hit the like button. It helps me because YouTube would know that this video is being watched by others like you. And if you have comments, as usual, I'll welcome your views. Thank you.